My name is Mohammed Abbas. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Queensland University of Technology. It's an honor for me to chair this session on scientific makerspaces. It will provide us a good opportunity to familiarize ourselves with the emerging technologies like 3D printing, bioprinting, and their implications for human rights and their impact on society in terms of sustainable development. So in this session, we have 3 presentations, and each presenter will have 20 minutes time. We will have a brief question and answer session towards the end of this session. If you have any questions, keep them to yourself and wait till the end of the session. And first of all, we have Dr. Sarah Walden as our first presenter. She is a postdoctoral research fellow at the QUT Soft Materials Laboratory, and her work is on developing new 3D printing materials, and we will learn from her research work as a postdoctoral research fellow. I hand over to Dr. Sarah Walden.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to tell you a bit about our research group's work. So I feel like we're having a bit of a shift in gears because I'm not from a makerspace. I'm from a research laboratory, but I guess you could almost call the research laboratory the original makerspace. It's where we all started. So I'm from the Soft Materials Laboratory here at QUT under the direction of Professor Christopher Barnakovic. And as you can probably tell from the picture and the title, we like playing with light. So our whole focus is how can we do chemistry with light and cool things that we can do with light. And one of the main reasons we like using light is because it has this amazing intensity dependence. So the way we do 3D printing with light is by having a highly focused laser beam. And only at that focal point where the intensity is at its maximum do you actually get 3D printing occurring. So this gives us a voxel, which is the equivalent of like a 2D pixel, but in the 3D scale. And then as you probably all know, as you move your stage relative to that light voxel, you can get your 3D printing. Light also has an amazing power of directionality. We can direct it wherever we want. It gives you this fantastic spatial control that you often don't get with thermal processes. And finally, it also has this wonderful wavelength dependence. So every color of light carries a slightly different packet of energy in it. And this gives us amazing control to turn on and off different chemical reactions by accessing these different energy packets. And as you can see here, as a group of chemists, we have this toolbox that we've developed over many years. And depending on what color we want to use or what application we're interested in, we can draw from our extensive toolbox. So one example of this is if you're interested in biological applications, which we'll hear about in the next talk, then obviously our skin has a bit of a yellow brownish tinge. And this means that it absorbs a lot of blue light. So you can't do blue light chemistry in biological applications. So what you need is chemistry in that yellow or red regime. So in that case, we draw from this end of our toolbox for those types of applications. So it's not important to remember any of these structures. I don't remember half of them myself because I'm a physicist, not a chemist. I'm just showing you them, and a couple of them will pop up a bit later on. So the Soft Materials Laboratory spans over 2 continents. We've got a group here at QUT and a group over in Germany, and it's been going on for many years now. So I'm kind of going to give you a highlight reel of some of our latest developments in light-based 3D printing. So photolithography, or light-based 3D printing, has been around for many, many years. So this is some of the cool twists that we've put on it in our research group. So I'm going to focus on erasable structures with different triggers, multi-component photoresists, and then finally high-resolution lithography. So in the erasable structure, we had an excellent PhD student a couple of years ago called Marcus Ziegler, who developed these 3D printing systems where he could have one resist, which is a liquid resin that you start with, and then when you bring in your laser, it hardens that resin. So he could have multi-component resins and print one section that was non-degradable, which if you want to get down to the molecular level, looks a bit like this. And then anything not printed, he would wash it away, bring along a different resin, and then print again this green structures here, on what we affectionately call our boxing rings. And after the secondary print with this secondary network, so you can see instead of O's for oxygen, we now have S for sulfur bonds. And in these green sections is made up of the sulfur-sulfur bonds. And when we apply a particular chemical trigger, Marcus was able to show that we could dissolve the sulfur network, but leave the oxygen-based networks intact. So now we could have selective degradation of multi-component materials. And you can see this printing on the microscale over here. So the pillars and these ropes here are in the non-degradable material. These other pillars are degradable. And then when he applied his trigger, the degradable parts would disappear. Of course, when you send this to reviewers, reviewer number 2 never likes it and is never happy and said, how do we know that you didn't just print it without the ropes? So then we actually had to do a physical demonstration of this. So we couldn't possibly degrade the ARC logo. So we did that in the non-degradable material. And in the KIT logo, we did in the degradable material. And you can see it degrading before your eyes there. So this is with a chemical trigger. And since this work, we've also developed materials that can dissolve with water as a trigger, with enzymes as a trigger, pH level as the trigger, lots of different materials. But we've also got light degradable materials. So this is a particular system that I really enjoy. This only came out 2 years ago. And it's great work by Rhiannon and Tobias over in Germany. And what they do is they have these red spots here. And when you hit them with one particular color of light, in this case 900 nanometers, those red spots all link up together and form a solid network. So that's how you get your structure. So in this case, it's a bunch of 8s down here in a solid structure. But this yellow part here can also absorb light of a different wavelength, in this case 700 nanometers. And when you come later with 700 nanometers, you can break apart that yellow section and break that network apart so it starts to dissolve again. So one color of light makes your material, another color of light selectively erases part of your material. And you can see an example of the microstructures over here that they printed. So in each case, they printed these rectangular prisms and then came along with the second laser and erased a portion. So in this top one, they erased a square in the middle that could then be washed away. In the second one, they created a hollow channel throughout the cube, or the rectangular prism. And in the third one, you can't see in this, but when you actually look at the fluorescence microscopy, so when this is actually broken, these guys fluoresce, which is beneficial, we can see what text is hidden within this rectangular prism. So this is a really cool technology that now we can custom, after it's been built, we can come back later and erase whatever parts we want. And the final one that I wanted to show you on the erasable structures is we've had chemical triggers, we've had light on as a trigger. This is one where light off is the trigger. So this is more of moldable materials that Hannes developed. And you can see here we've got it's about a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter material that he's made, and it's kind of a pink transparent color. And as long as you keep this under green light or visible light, it will stay a solid material for as long as you want. We did it for days, weeks, it stayed solid. But as soon as you turn the light off, you can see this pink color returning. And the pink color is a sign of these bonds starting to fall apart and getting their color back. And the longer you leave this, the more this material degrades until it's just a blob sitting on the table. And you can mold this into whatever shape you want then, put it back under green light, and it'll harden back up again, which is a really nice feature. So that's our work in erasable materials. Of course, you saw in the first example by Marcus that unfortunately we had to print with one type of material, wash away the resin, bring a new resin, and then print with the second type of material, where this is a next step in development of this by Sabrina, Lucas, and David. And they found compatible materials. So they went to our toolbox and developed some new molecules to go in our toolbox and found these 2 compatible molecules. So the squares here show where they are most reactive. So you can see the blue molecule here, which is shown in these squares, is most reactive in this 435 or blue light region. The purple one is most reactive over here in the purple light, in the UV region, sorry. And where the purple one is most reactive, the blue doesn't react at all. And where the blue is most reactive, the purple doesn't react at all. So this gave us a system where we could mix these 2 together, and using one color of light, so you have a network of them both sitting in solution. With one color of light, you can cure one network, completely wash away the other. With the other color of light, you can cross-link the second network and completely wash away the first. And we took this up to a material basis using a photo mask, and we covered half of the photo mask with just a piece of electrical tape and irradiated half of it. Then we switched over the electrical tape, irradiated the other half from one resin, 2 sources of light immediately after one another. And we were able to get, it's a little bit hard to see in this picture, but you can see the top half where it was irradiated with UV light gave us a soft, wrinkly, very swollen type material. And the bottom half that was irradiated with blue light gave us a very stiff, smooth material. So all of a sudden, from one resist, 2 colors of light, we can print multi-material, well, multi-property materials. So we took this one step further in a follow-up study. And if we have, so the example we used here was a swellable material. So for example, say our green network here is highly swellable, and then we have a non-swellable or stiff material that we overlay or interpenetrate with it. Then the amount to which we cross-link or solidify this orange network scales back the extent to which the green networks can swell. So we did this again with our photo mask. We've got the green network in the middle, which we irradiated with the UV light, and then we came back with the blue light and irradiated the whole area. And then the time with which we irradiated the whole area controlled how much this material could swell, because we're just putting a cap on and effectively suffocating it to a degree so it couldn't swell as much as it wanted to. So now by having these 2 different wavelengths and 2 different interpenetrating materials, we can get highly tunable material properties to tailor to whatever we need. And we just looked at swellability, but this could be used in a bunch of other different applications as well. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is Stead Lithography, which is something very close to my heart. It kind of mixes my PhD with my current postdoc work. And this is a Nobel Prize winning idea by Stefan Hell, which I've shamelessly put a picture of myself up here with because I got to meet him a couple of years ago. And the principle of Stead Lithography is when you focus a light beam down for 3D printing, so you've seen a lot of microstructures in my talk today, because when you focus a light beam down, you're inherently limited in how small that can be. Physics says you just can't get it any smaller than that. And Stefan Hell came up with this idea that if we have one light beam that turns a molecule on, so he was interested in microscopy, so he wanted to turn its fluorescence on, but then you overlay it with this donut beam here, and you turn all the outside areas back off again. And that was done by a process called stimulated emission, but that's not so important. And then when you overlay these 2 beams, you turn off all this area in the outside, and you're only left with a tiny little spot in the middle where the molecule is still in that on state. And that's a top view. From a side view, you can see it here, that when you bring in this secondary beam, you really squeeze that voxel down quite small. So they did this for microscopy, and in traditional optical microscopy, you can see here that this feature just looks like one large blob. But when you bring in this Stead idea for fluorescence microscopy, you can resolve the fact that there's 2 features there that we couldn't see before. So he was awarded the Nobel Prize for this in 2014. And what he did for microscopy, we really wanted to develop for lithography as well. So we went back to our toolbox, and this is one of the molecules that we had in our toolbox. And when you shine 700 nanometers on this molecule, it does a bunch of things. And this OH group up here points in an upwards direction. And when this OH group is pointing up, it's reactive, and it can react with another molecule and form a solid bond and a network. But while it's in this vertical position, if you shine blue light on this molecule, it rotates to be in a downward direction. And when it's in this position, it cannot react at all. It goes back into an unreactive state. So this gave us an on light and an off light that we could use for Stead lithography. So what Patrick Mueller up here did was put a bunch of these molecules on the surface. And then if he came in with his standard focused beam, then he'd have an irradiation area of approximately this size. But when you turn on your depletion beam, all of a sudden you narrow that area down until you get a really small effective printing volume. And you can see the results that they did here. So up here is when they only have the excitation beam on, and then down the bottom is where they turn the depletion beam on. And the higher energy they use in that depletion beam, the more they squeeze that effective volume further and further down. And when there's no depletion power, we're getting structures about 350 nanometers. With maximum depletion power for this system, we're able to get down to sub-100, so about 4 times better resolution in our printing structures here. And this was back in 2017. Since then, we've found some more systems, tried out some different things. And then there's this study by Reuven and Patrick where we found a molecule, it could be turned on one color of light, off with another. And in this instance, we were able to get the printing resolution down to 26 nanometers, which when you think of an atom as about 1/10 of a nanometer, we're getting very, very small. We're in the hundreds of atoms wide here. So this was a huge achievement for us to get printing down on this level. And when I met Stefan Hell, I talked to him a bit about this, and he said for microscopy, they also found that this 20 nanometer was kind of the inherent limit of this technique, but we have more ideas to maybe push it a bit further. So now that we can print on this nanoscale, the goal obviously is all these features I've talked to you about with erasability, multi-component resists, trying to get all that functionality now down onto the nanoscale as well. So going back to our toolbox, further developing our toolbox to give us more of those abilities. And a big one we're chasing at the moment is conductivity. If we can print conductive nanostructures, then we can get all our electrical components down into that scale. With some of our degradable materials and erasable materials, we've already done tests with releases. So we've made these into little spheres that can be penetrating through the system and do slow release of drugs or whatever you're interested in. So really then putting these systems into real life applications is where we want to go. And the final goal for us is 2-color printing. So instead of having one focus laser beam, you have 2 overlapping laser beams, which just brings the cost of printing down significantly. So that's the work of our research group. There's many, many people all across the world who have contributed. So these guys are legends. Thank you for listening.